Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Risk with Dr. Naveen Agarwal. Each week, we talk about a topic related to risk management of medical devices in a very casual and informal way. This is not a webinar or lecture. Rather, our goal is to talk about key topics and challenges in a very informal way and share best practices. I'm your host, Naveen Agarwal, and I'm the principal and founder at Achieve, where my personal mission is to help you achieve success in risk management. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Let's Talk Risk conversation. Today, we're going to have a very interesting perspective, an engineering perspective, also from a regulatory side as well. So we know that one of the pain points in our whole process is the connection between risk analysis and design controls. And today, I have Alex Segert here, who has done it himself hands-on, and he brings in a very fresh perspective. We're going to talk about an example and really share with you a couple of pain points and challenges and how to overcome them. But guys, as you know, this is not a webinar or this is not a lecture. This is a very collaborative conversation where I invite all of you to participate and share your own perspective, your own insights. It doesn't have to be a Q&A, but you can share whatever you have come across in your experience and how you have solved some real-world problems. So I can't wait to have this conversation with Alex. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome, Alex. So why don't you start by introducing yourself briefly to our audience?
Sure. So Alex Segert, I'm a professional engineer, certified reliability engineer, certified in functional safety. So I've worked in a variety of fields. I've worked in research and development. I've worked for public utilities, mostly in the reliability, availability, maintainability, and safety function, what we call RAMs. I've also spent some of my career in the lab doing R&D. So I'm used to working with product and development and doing material testing. So I have I come at the problem of medical device safety from that perspective.
Fantastic, Alex. So before we got onto the show, we were briefly talking about this work you did with a catheter. Mm-hmm. And I want you to just set the stage for our audience about what the situation was first and, how you really looked into the risk analysis and connecting it with the design controls.
For sure. So the example that I brought up with Naveen was for a balloon catheter intended for venous insertion on a guide wire. And so we did a risk analysis, and we started out with a hazard analysis where we were looking at the sequence of events. And in this particular case, we're looking at a failure in tension of the shaft of the balloon catheter while it was being withdrawn. So basically that the force required to pull it would exceed the strength of the catheter itself, and it would split or break away while it was inside the patient. We knew that we had a user need specified for the catheter that would be a 3 French size based on consultation with our medical professionals. And so we needed to figure out what the strength requirement of that would be in order to affect the probability that it would separate.
And this separation, so Alex, I'm trying to imagine the situation, and I actually have come across some adverse events in the public domain where when you pull it back and if it breaks, it can block the vein or the artery where you are operating it, right? That I cannot imagine. That is probably not a good idea, not a good situation to be, right?
Yeah, it's never a good situation when things don't go the way you expect them to, right?
So what I'm hearing you say is that through your understanding of the hazardous situation and harm, you build a sequence of events to inform how you would build the requirements. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. So weren't at the stage where we wanted to necessarily revise the design, but we wanted to show that the current design was adequate.
Okay.
So what we did was we set up a simulator and did some trials to replicate what that force would be. And we were able to measure that and show that we had an average of about 1.5 newtons with a certain standard deviation.
Mhm.
And then we were able to take some of the samples that we had of the catheter and put them on what we call the Instron machine, where you pull them apart and it measures the force. And we were showing that our design was capable of approximately 50 newtons with a certain standard deviation. So there's a technique in reliability engineering called stress strength interference. And the idea is that if the stress required in the application exceeds the strength, that's when you'll have a failure. But if you have the distribution of strengths and the distribution of stresses, if you consider that to be a sort of a continuous function, you can calculate what the probability of the stress overwhelming the strength would be. And if you have a large margin, then you can calculate a very low probability of failure.
Mm-hmm. And with these probability estimates, I think we can also, using the sequence of events we have built, we can project forward what the probability of harm could be and do some quantitative analysis, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So when you look at the sequence of events, we use fault tree analysis type technique, or the math behind a fault tree analysis, to look at the sequence being this event and the next event and the next event, depending on how many controls you have in sequence. So when you have these probabilities, the product of those different AND gates becomes the overall probability, the P1, if you will, that the hazardous situation will occur.
Wonderful. So Alex, just hold that for a second. Guys, if you are joining just now, today we are having a conversation about connecting risk analysis with design requirements. And we have started talking about an example of a balloon catheter. So Alex, to some people, it might sound too complicated. And they might say, look, we don't have enough information. We don't have enough data to be able to do these probability estimates accurately or reliably. How do you address that situation?
We try and look for what we can do. So there are certain areas, for example, where probability might not be knowable or might not be controllable. And in that case, in our chain of events, we would assign that as a probability of 1 or certainty. And it's a conservative worst case approach. But what it allows us to do is then concentrate on the things where we know we have control and making sure that we get adequate performance out of those.
Mm-hmm. Got you. So it's very, very important. What I'm hearing you say is that very important to build a sequence of events to the extent we can, based on our knowledge and experience and understanding. And it is that sequence of events which drives your overall analysis. Is that right?
Yeah.
And in some cases, we may not know with good certainty or good estimates of probability or quantitative estimate, and that's where we can assume 1. But what I'm also hearing is that we can't assume 1 for everything. Otherwise, we are not doing any engineering analysis.
Well, you can assume 1 for everything, but what you might find is that then the outcome that you're trying to avoid, so the harm that you're trying to avoid, will be, if your P1 is 1, then there's a certainty of some sort of harm.
Yeah.
Now, it may be that in your risk acceptance, that harm is considered to be minor enough that it's acceptable without reduction, but likely not. So the important thing is calling out the individual steps, or the individual elements of the sequence, so that you can concentrate on where you're going to reduce that. And it's extremely useful, I've found, when you're comparing, the 14971 specifies or recommends design control as being the primary risk reduction.
Yeah.
Compared to documentation or instruction or something like that. And when you look at the numbers, you can get a very small probability out of a design with a very marginal increase in complexity. But you're not going to get better than maybe 1 in 100 for reducing or preventing human error.
Yeah.
So you it really makes a clear case to, put the money into the engineering of the product or into the design of the product and control that because the tools are available, than relying on the human factor.
Got you. So, Alex, this is a great example. And let's say now we have done excellent amount of work in design. We have tested it. We have verified and validated this. Now we are going into production. Can you say a little bit more about how you would link your design requirements to what might, go wrong in the production space, like we do PFMEAs? How do we connect this two?
Absolutely. So what I do in my practice is when we get through the risk analysis and all of that, we get into an FMEA, and the FMEA is really a reliability control document. It's not really a risk reduction document, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But what I do is when we look at the specific causes, we look at the controls to prevent those causes, and that would be typically in production. There could be an incoming quality screening, different requirements. But the idea is that if we're generating a PFMEA, we're tying into the severity that we've seen on the risk analysis and on the design side. It's the same severity level, if you will. But where the PFMEA focuses on the process and the effect of the failure to control the process is that we have inadequate product, and if that product is inadequate, it's got a severity associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a one-to-one necessarily between the design and the PFMEA, but the PFMEA represents the process and the effects of the failure modes of the process.
Mm-hmm. So what you're highlighting here is that there is a connection. We can treat the process FMEA as a separate standalone document and not worried about that. We have to build some connectivity. And ISO 14971, I believe, is very clear on traceability. And when we build this connectivity, I think we can have better traceability.
Absolutely. And that's why when I concentrate on traceability, I look at, like I say, the first example is the severity of the effect, having that translate all the way through, so that if somebody is working at a third-party manufacturer, something like that, they realize that the quality problem that they may have had, or the nonconformance they may have had, what that means to your product, and eventually, at the end user level.
Okay, so I want to make sure we don't lose that point, because you are saying that we should build this traceability all the way to on the supplier side, which could be involved in a third-party manufacturing, for example. And in that interface between us and them, there should be, a good handshake.
Yeah, normally what I've done in the past is I've the manufacturer has their own PFMEA for controlling their own processes, and we have an interim document that connects that to our design. So they might report a nonconformant, and we know it fairly quickly what that means in terms of our product.
Fantastic. So, guys, I think this is a great setup for our conversation now. I'm going to start inviting you to participate in this discussion. Keep in mind, this is not just a Q&A session. This is all about you also sharing your perspective, the challenges you have faced in your practice, and some of the solutions that you have come up with that could be useful to share with our broader community. So I want to start inviting you. Please don't hold back and join this conversation to the extent that you can. And, if you are not able to or feel comfortable speaking live, you can also add a comment here. Share your thoughts in a comment, and I will read that out and share with everybody. So, Alex, while we wait for people to join, I want to touch upon another topic that is very close to my heart, and that is of system safety. And you're the best person to kind of help us understand a little bit at a higher level. Medical device is a system. It operates in a complex environment.
Absolutely.
Help us understand why following some principles of system safety is beneficial for risk management.
So I think that the real critical element that I've observed is the idea that the functional analysis. So knowing and having clarity on what part does what or is expected to do what. What's the responsibility of the software? What's the responsibility of what are we relying on to prevent this failure? And having that mapped out and having consensus across the development team, and being able to revisit that through the process is invaluable because there you find that I sat down with people where there's been a couple of cycles of development of a device, and there are new hires or something like that, and we sit down and we go through the device and we say, well, just from the blueprints or from the drawings, what does this do? Why is this shaped like this? And come away from these sessions and people are like, I've been working here 5 years. I never knew that was why that was.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
like,
a deeper understanding of the functionality of each part, how it connects with each other, and how they interact with each other. And that is the essential definition of a system, right, Alex? Is that it's not just a sum of its parts. These parts are interacting and producing something that is more than just a sum of the parts.
absolutely. And just to make the point also, interactions with the user, mapping those things out really helps to specify those things when you go into a human factors analysis or something like that as well.
Mm-hmm. So can you say a little bit more about where do we find it most challenging in a practical way to understand these relationships right from the start, right from the early stage of development and through development and launch? These systems are also evolving, right? They're not fixed in time. So can you share a couple of examples of the challenges that you have seen where people struggle to build these relationships and have a good understanding?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones is, if you don't start early, you can get committed to elements of a design, or you can, it can be it can really restrict your approach. And so, even if you just have, the risk management process can be about setting target values, not necessarily define accepting whether or not the current prototype is effective or will be safe and effective. By setting those targets, now you know what you're shooting for. So if you say that, this thing's going to have a braking strength of 100 newtons, your engineers can go and they can design much more efficiently in that box than saying, let's try this. Oh, it broke. Let's try the next version.
Mm-hmm.
That iterative process, a lot of people, especially in the engineering space, they love it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you get to experiment, you get to try new ideas, etc. The other problem is that when you get to something that works, there's not a lot of data collected for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you end up, there's been a lot of money invested in that, getting to that point, and it's all threatened by whether or not the device is actually going to measure up.
Right.
When you start putting in your formal risk management process.
Yeah. So I can see how this is all interconnected, right? I think building a sequence of events provides us that understanding of the interaction between different parts of the system. With that understanding, we can figure out where things can fail, where things can go wrong. And based on that analysis, we can set some kind of a quantitative target performance value. And that is part of the design requirements process to me, right? Did I get that right?
Absolutely. They say design input for the outputs of risk management. And I take that to heart.
Got you. So guys, I hope you're enjoying this conversation. I would love for you to participate. So please don't hold back. Raise your hand and become part of this conversation. Share what you have in mind. Do you have a question that you have thought about a lot during the design control process and connecting risk analysis to design control that has kind of, has been on your mind and you are looking for some conversation around that? Maybe we don't solve that issue right away, but maybe we are able to talk about that. So this is all about conversation, and I encourage you not to hold back and be part of this. So Alex, let's continue. Looks like our audience is a little bit quiet today. Generally, we have a lot more participation in this. So let's make things a little bit more interesting. So let me ask you this from your perspective as an engineer. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit and focus on the theme of collaboration. I think it definitely takes a cross-functional approach and a team to do this right. What are some of the best practices you have seen in your practice that brings everybody together in a collaborative way?
So I definitely look for or recommend cross-functional teams. Have the subject matter experts in the room, and that not just for engineering, of course, but clinical staff, medically informed people as well. Um, you know, there's a much larger process than just sitting down and working out the sequence of events. But I think that it's important to you know, have the same people in the room over and over. And then, of course, when you get to a design review, you've got an independent reviewer that helps to support that and sort of, validate that you're not getting too far into groupthink.
Got you. But it'll be important to have the right independent reviewer, right? We're not going to check the box.
No.
We're going to have the person who has the expertise and independence to be able to ask the right questions and push back and challenge. All right, Phil, you have joined us, so I would love to invite you to unmute your mic and share what you have in mind.
Good morning, Evian. Good morning, Alex. Yeah, I have a question. So I'm a human factors engineer and doing it on the human factors and usability side. And to your point, so we work with a use-related risk analysis, or a UFMEA, that it winds up being. And before that, there's generally a task analysis that should happen, right? That gets into a hazard analysis and then a URA. To your point of traceability, some people think of the task analysis as a URA? They're kind of the same thing, and I believe wholeheartedly they're separate things. So in the way of creating that connection between a task analysis to a URA, do you feel that both of them tend to be living documents sometimes too, right? Do you feel that there should be a connection of like a URA IID to a task analysis? Or do you feel that the task analysis should be disconnected from the URA after the URA has been created?
So I would say I definitely favor the task analysis as being sort of one of the founding documents. And normally when I've worked with medical professionals, it's like, here's how we intend to use this thing, and here's how we access, and here's what we do, and these sorts of things, even if it's like very broad strokes. And I bring that into the risk analysis. And what I like to do is when I do that risk analysis where I'm picking up the sequence of events, to consult all the voices, all the different people. So not just design, but also the clinicians, to get that user feedback.
Of course.
So then that becomes like whatever the user is doing as part of the sequence of events, and then that gets listed out and flagged for specification and control in the FMEA.
Agreed. But specifically the connection, the traceability, as you kind of mentioned, how would you mark that traceability more than just? Obviously we're gonna call out the document numbers, connecting the two of the documents, right? But down to more of a granular level, of each one of the tasks. Do you feel like it's necessary to connect those to the URL also, or more at a high level?
Yeah, so I would connect those tasks to so the tasks are the things that are supposed to go right? And the risk analysis is really more concerned with the things that go wrong. But I would look at those, that the task list, or the steps in the process, and highlight what those are, and when they can go wrong, what they relate to, and put that into the risk analysis.
So Phil, I think one of the things that you are struggling with, I suspect, is how to actually do this in practice. And do we need some identifiers for line items in our URA and task analysis or FMEAs? I'll share with you, what I have done in my practice is certainly I've, used database practices, good practices in database management, do that, but find the key sort of fields or elements that provide the anchoring of this traceability. And what I have used in my practice is use the hazard ID as the connecting element across the board. So whether it's a design FMEA, a process FMEA, a use risk analysis, software risk analysis, anything, because these kind of different documents, they can live at different places, but you can anchor those tables using the hazard ID. So we can go into a lot more detail with that, Phil, if you like, but there are many ways to do it, not just one way.
And I think, just to make that point, what I've seen is that everybody has a different sort of tracking system. So really, I focus on making sure everybody's got a common understanding of what the hazardous situation is, regardless of how that's found in the database, just so that people are aware they're solving the same problem.
And unfortunately, we are still living in the world of Excel. I know there are many other tools available out there, and hopefully, database management practices have been out there for a long time. I hope you can use them. All right, so let's continue our conversation, guys. Ed, thank you for your patience. Please unmute your mic and share what you have in mind. Ed, can you hear me?
Unmute.
Oh, we can hear you now. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I forget that. There's so many good things coming out of this discussion. I mean, we talked about the iterative part of risk management, that we have to go through this thing several times. And then the next thing I thought about is one of the most successful project teams I was ever on is the entire team was co-located in one space. So we had engineering, we had manufacturing, we had regulatory, quality, everybody in one room. And the way it operated, just if you can visually think of this, is we all had desks around the outside of the room, and in the middle was a table that when a question came up, we rotated our chairs, moved over to the table, and we discussed right away the issue at hand. And it got the points of view of everybody, because this is truly a cross-functional exercise. And I like to say that risk management is a team sport.
Yeah.
We need to have lots of people involved. So that was a good thing. And then we went on to all the different documents, the FMEA, the use-related risk analysis. One thing that people lose sight of, I'm afraid, with some of these tools, especially as I look at URRA, it looks to be a complete risk analysis in itself, and it becomes a standalone document that doesn't feed into the risk traceability summary. And traceability is a requirement of 14971.
Yeah.
We have to trace all of the hazards from the initial document we identified them all the way through the final risk control verifications and the final risk value that is assigned. And that's a wonderful opportunity for a database type of tool to do rather than the Excel spreadsheets. And I know there's a software tool that Fubin Wu's created called QM Space that kind of goes in that direction. I don't know if there's any other tools out there we can talk about.
Yeah.
But that would be helpful to pull it all into one space and use, like you said, the hazard ID number that is assigned, which is unique to all of the hazards that we've identified.
Got you. Thank you, Ed. So, guys, I know we are running short on time. So, Darpan, I'm going to give you the last word. Please be brief. Share what you have in mind.
Yeah, so I can talk about this traceability thing for an hours and hours, but like as you have explained, like how this risk management traceability down to those FMEA level documents, this is standard practice among some of the organizations. Like they do the FMEA, like a system design FMEAs, URRA, cybersecurity FMEA, software FMEA process. So the one way to connect to the top level hazard analysis that is from ISO 4971, that those FMEA has been limited to like a standard end effect as a system level, and those effect, how it is connected to the hazardous situations that predicts P1. So those end effect from all the FMEAs, the one way of the good practice is to harmonize along all the FMEAs, like a sterility compromised. That can be a failure from the design failure, process failure, or use failure, right? So that's how you can just harmonize all those standard end effect and link it to the hazardous situations of 4971 risk analysis. And thereafter, there are many tools out there, like as one of the Ed has mentioned, and the practices using like a DOORS, IBM Rational DOORS, and the Polarian Blinkers thing. those are like very good software to linking all those documents to the top level risk analysis, like a attribute to attribute, and that hazard IDs can be pulled over. Traceability is very, very good when you link it, the document across the risk management files. It is very good, useful tool.
Yeah.
So that's what I
Thank you. Darpan, I love this. I love the ideas that you have shared. Unfortunately, we're running short on time, so I'm going to give Alex just a couple of minutes to collect his thoughts and share with us 2 or 3 key takeaway points. In the meantime, I'm going to share a few announcements with you guys. We are not going to be meeting next week. We are celebrating Thanksgiving in the U.S., so happy Thanksgiving to all of you if you celebrate. I know Alex in Canada, you probably celebrate a week before, right?
In October.
In October. Oh, you have already celebrated Thanksgiving. Great. So we won't meet next week, but we will start the week after. And guys, we do this 11 o'clock Eastern on every Friday. So just if you like this, put it on your calendar, show up. And we're going to be talking about interesting stuff. And finally, don't forget that every one of you, have something unique to share. Regardless of your experience or whether you are from a different industry or not, I invite you to get engaged. Reach out to me if you want to participate, has an idea that you want to discuss with people, or even a question that you want to ask our community members and have them share their expertise and insights with you. We want this to be as conversational and as engaging as possible. So reach out to me if you want. Alex, with that, the floor is yours. Please share just 2 or 3 key takeaway points today.
Sure. So thank you very much, Naveen, for this opportunity and to the audience for joining us. Like I say, I think that for me, as an engineer, it comes down to the physics of the situation. Like, how thick does it have to be? What's the probability of failure? That's really where my mind tends to go. But expands that to consider, the contributions of others in terms of like usability, for example, or software and things like that. We say, design inputs are the outputs of risk management, and ISO 13485 makes a point of defining that risk-based approach. So for me, what that reflects is performing a quantitative risk analysis, so used to establish targets early on. This drives your design requirements, performance requirements, which you can then derive your material specifications and quality assurance activities. Then traceability, the need to set up traceability in your documentation so that you can facilitate the risk analysis of proposed changes and assess any risk impacts of errors or nonconformities in your process controls. And then just understanding how the sequence of events can lead to that hazardous situation or the mishaps, being able to understand which elements of the system will carry the weight for risk reduction, and being comfortable with the fact that there are some things you won't be able to control, and therefore you're just going to assume that they're going to happen anyway. So the responsibility for risk control may not be evenly distributed across the system.
Wonderful, Alex. Thank you for sharing these insights. I think there's a lot packed in there. So guys, when the recording is available, I would encourage you to take a listen again, because Alex, what you went through is just brilliant and so compressed and so insightful. Thank you so much, guys. Ed, Phil, and Darpan for coming on and sharing your thoughts. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. I hope you had a good time. I hope you enjoyed it. Share your emotions using these emojis. I love that. I loved hearing back from you. So reach out anytime to give me your feedback. Any ideas or suggestions you have for future conversations, they're all welcome. With that, enjoy the Thanksgiving holiday next week, guys. We will connect once again the week after. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.